Today we're looking at standard form. Now, part of standard form, we're going to learn how to graph linear equations using intercepts and to write linear equations in standard form. Now, standard form, in general, is ax plus by equals c, where a, b, and c are integers. So if you look at number 1, this is in standard form because the x and the y are on the same side of the equal sign, and the 3, the 4, and the 24 are all integers. Now example 1 is asking us to find the x and y intercept for the equation. Remember, we've learned already what a y-intercept is. It's where your graph crosses the y-axis. So say I had a line like this, okay? The y-intercept is right here where it crosses the y-axis. So an x-intercept would be right here. It's where it crosses the x-axis. Well, let's say our x-intercept was right here. The coordinates of the x-intercept would be 2, 0. Let's say the y-intercept was right here. The coordinates of that y-intercept would be 0, 2. Every x-intercept is going to have a y value of 0. Every y-intercept is going to have a x value of 0. So let's actually look at these examples. If I want to figure out what an x and y intercept is for the equation, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the x-intercept. The way I do this is I let y equal 0. So I take my equation and I'm going to rewrite it, but I'm going to replace the y with 0. Then I'm going to solve for x. 4 times 0 is 0, so I'm really just left with 3x equals 24. I divide by 3, and I get that x equals 8. So my x-intercept, and intercepts we're always going to write as ordered pairs, is 8, 0. And again, I use the 0 because I said that y was 0. And that's how I found my x-intercept. So to find a y-intercept, I am going to let x equal 0. So I would take the same equation, but replace the x with 0. So 3 times 0 is 0. So this basically just cancels out, and I'm left with 4y equals 24. I would divide by 4, and 24 divided by 4 is 6. So since I had to let x equal 0, my y-intercept is 0, 6. So here's my x-intercept. Here's my y-intercept. So let's do it with the same thing with this example. For my x-intercept, I'm going to let y equal 0. So I have x minus 4 times 0 equals negative 8. 4 times 0 is 0, so I get x equals negative 8. So my x-intercept is negative 8, 0. My y-intercept I let x equal 0. So I have 0 minus 4y equals negative 8. Well, 0 just cancels out, so I'm left with negative 4y equals negative 8. I divide by negative 4. Negative 8 divided by negative 4 is positive 2. So I get y equals 2. So that means my y-intercept is 0, 2. So my x-intercept is negative 8, 0. My y-intercept is 0, 2. So that is how you algebraically figure out what your x and your y intercepts are. So let's look at the next example. This says graph the equations by finding the x and y intercepts. So we're going to do the exact same thing we did before, but we're going to graph our answers. So my x-intercept, I plug in 0 for y. So x minus 2 times 0 equals negative 2. 2 times 0 is 0, so I'm left with x equals negative 2. So my x-intercept is negative 2, comma 0. That is one ordered pair. So I'm going to plot that on my line. Negative 2, 0. So it's an x-intercept, so it's on the x-axis at negative 2. The y-intercept, I have 0 for x. So 0 minus 2y equals negative 2. So that's negative 2y equals negative 2. I divide by negative 2 on both sides, and I get that y equals 1. So my y-intercept is 0, comma 1. So on my y-axis, I make a point at 1. Once you are done, you need to connect the 2 points to make your line. So I just graphed the equation. So doing this, you should always have a point on the x-axis and a point on the y-axis. So let's look at example number 4. So this one, again, same thing. I'm going to find my x-intercept first by letting y equal 0. So I have 4x plus 5 times 0 equals 20. So I'm really just left with 4x equals 20. I divide by 4, and I get that x equals 5. So I make one ordered pair at 5, comma 0. So on my x-axis, I'm making a point at 5. My y-intercept, I let x equal 0. So 4 times 0 plus 5y equals 20. So 4 times 0 is 0, so I'm left with 5y equals 20. I divide by 5, and I get that y equals 4. So my y-intercept is 0, comma 4. So on the y-axis, I make a point at 4. Once I've made one point on the x-axis, one point on the y-axis, I draw my line. So that is how you graph using x and y intercepts. Now, horizontal and vertical lines. We've already talked about these, but in a case of x equals negative 1, okay, if you have an x equals, that means it has to cross the x-axis. So x equals negative 1, you are going to put a dot at negative 1 on your x-axis. Now, x equals are vertical lines. It means that every x value has to be negative 1. So it's a vertical line through negative 1. Y equals 4, these we've already seen that they're horizontal lines, right? But we would put a point at 4 on the y-axis, and every y value has to be 4, so it forms a horizontal line. So x equals are vertical, y equals are horizontal. Okay, so now let's look at just standard form. We've already used standard form to actually find out what x-intercepts and y-intercepts are, but sometimes we'll be asked to put an equation into standard form. The important things about standard form is that they have to be integers. So we cannot have fractions or decimals. So if I look at number 1, I have y equals 1/2 x plus 3. Right now this is in slope-intercept form. If I want to put this into standard form, the first thing I am going to do is I am going to get rid of the fraction so I don't have to deal with it anymore. Since I'm not trying to solve for x, I'm just trying to get rid of the fraction, what we do is we multiply everything by the denominator. So in this case, the denominator is 2, so I'm going to multiply everything by 2. So that means the y gets multiplied by 2. 2 times y is 2y. The 1/2 gets multiplied by 2. 1/2 x times 2, well, half of 2 is 1, so this will be 1x. And the 3 gets multiplied by 2. So 3 times 2 is 6. Now from here, I need to put it into standard form. Standard form, the x and the y are on the same side of the equal sign. So right now, the x isn't on the same side as the y, so I'm going to move it over. Since I'm moving everything over, I am going to minus x. Now, if you notice, the x goes before the y, so when I write it, I'm going to write negative x plus 2y equals 6. Now there's one more thing about standard form. The a value cannot be negative. So I'm not quite done yet. What I'm going to do here is get rid of the negative x. The way I can get rid of a negative sign is to multiply by -1. And again, since it's an equation, everything has to get multiplied. So -1 times negative x is a positive x. -1 times 2y is a negative 2y. And -1 times 6 is -6. So my final answer is x minus 2y equals -6. So let's try one more example. This one, before I can even worry about putting it in standard form, right? This right now is in point slope form. I can't have parentheses. So my first step is I'm going to get rid of the parentheses. So this is y minus 2 equals -1/3 x. -1/3 times -6 is a positive 2. Now I'm going to move the -2 over just like I would if I was putting it in slope-intercept form. So I would add 2. So I get y equals -1/3 x plus 4. So from here, now it's just like problem number 1. I can't have fractions, so the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of the 1/3 by multiplying everything by 3. So I'm going to do this over here. So I would get 3y equals 3 times -1/3 x is -1x, and 3 times 4 is positive 12. Now, to make sure it's in standard form, I need to move the x and the y on the same side of the equal sign. So I would add x to both sides. The x goes in front, so it would be x plus 3y equals 12. And I'm done now because my x is positive. So that would be standard form. Now, that's enough for today. We're going to do example 4, write the equation of the lines given 2 points in standard form, in class together tomorrow. Make sure you fill out the Google form, and I will see you guys tomorrow.